Hello, everyone. I'm here today. Had the pleasure of speaking with Robert Drysdale. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Robert Drysdale is a fifth degree Brazilian black belt under Leo Vieira, correct?
Correct?
Retired, undefeated UFC fighter, a historian, a father, a jiu-jitsu coach, an author, a speaker. Did I miss anything? Wow.
I think that's about it.
That's a lot. Also, the co-founder, I'd say, of Zenith Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Correct.
And you have several academies that are under your own team affiliation, right?
Correct. Correct.
Another stream in the river of life of jiu-jitsu.
Yes. Another stream.
That's awesome. Speaking of streams and jiu-jitsu, we're here really talking about your book, your second book, right? Entitled The Evolution, right? Help me out. The
The
Evolution.
rise and evolution of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Rise and Evolution. I had the great pleasure of actually purchasing the audiobook, and I'm an audiobook fanatic because I'm in grad school right now and have a million things going on, and I can, work out and drive and listen to things. So I really appreciate you putting out the book and the audiobook, which is a whole nother thing. It's like doing another book, and it's a major undertaking. So I appreciate, you know, having, having had the opportunity to read about it, to learn more about jujitsu and become more educated on the history of jujitsu. So what inspired you to write this book?
I think the inspiration was the first one. That was the beginning of the story. I felt that there was a lot of things that I wanted to say in the first book that didn't fit. So I finished the first book with a homage to Carlson, and I felt there was a lot to be said about him and his career and his role in developing jiu-jitsu. And I just like to write. I like to read. I had a lot more I wanted to say. And it was just like, I had a vague idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to tackle a more recent period of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. The name kind of followed from that. Like, why did we become so popular? That was the question. Like, where did we come from? Why did we become so popular? How did that happen? How did we evolve from judo to today? And I touched on some of these issues in the first book, but I don't think I dived in enough in the second one. In the first one, so I just wanted the second one to be about that, right? And I think I accomplished that goal. I mean, at least that's what people tell me, people who read it.
Yeah, I think the book is fantastic, right?
Thank
It's an extraordinary undertaking to really taking the reader through this whole account, chronological account of the history of jujitsu, the evolution, from the roots, like, from Japan to the Amazon to Rio. I find that very fascinating, and to the world. And now it's extremely popular that you see Mark Zuckerberg and like all this like famous people are not only training but competing in the same tournaments that we're competing and training
yeah,
participating at. So it's very interesting to see like that in the mainstream media, right? Why is
yeah,
that? What's going on with that?
yeah. So I think that the book comes out at the right time too. I think that there's a lot of new people that are wondering where did jiu-jitsu come from. So I think that hopefully the two books answer that question. Maybe not every question, but I think some of the main ones it helped answer. I'm not the first one to do this. There are people that came before me. People that did an outstanding job researching the history of jiu-jitsu. So I'm just another one. I think that maybe my position in the jiu-jitsu community helped me promote the books better than others could. Maybe my language is a little bit easier to tackle, but there's just been a collective effort of a lot of people to try to get this to tell our history, as in a more accurate, more unbiased way.
Absolutely. The book is fascinating. It covers so much ground, right? It talks about what is jujitsu? Like we take for granted. That's a big question. It's not easily defined. We think we know, jujitsu is what I do. It's what I go and I put on the gi and I roll around. No, it's not quite as simple to really understand what it means, and how to truly define it correctly, and how many styles of jiu-jitsu are really there. Like, why do we train jiu-jitsu? What about that question, right? That's all covered in the book. And also, not in a book, but I've looked up online your TEDx talk, and what is the point of winning? Like, why do we do what we do? Like, these are all existential questions, right? I come from a psychotherapy, clinical psychology background, so this fits in with the existential philosophy and existential psychology as well, right? Like, why do we do who we are, where we're going? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I ask myself these questions every day since I was a child. So
One
they're
of those.
constant. They're constant themes in my head. I never really have a good answer, but I ask the question. At least I know what questions to ask. I think that's something. But yeah, I think that's a theme in my own thought process. I think it comes across in my writing. It comes across in my teaching. Um, but the closest thing to an answer is we create our purpose. It's not my answer, but it's borrowed. But I think it's a good answer.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So really, I love books, right? I am a book fanatic. I don't know when that happened. I think since I was a kid. I enjoy going to libraries, and books are my friends. But that's not the case for everybody, right? And not everybody seems to understand the importance of knowing the history of things, like the what's behind the history of things. So what's the importance, right? Why should you know? Why should you care uh, about the history of jiu-jitsu?
Well, even to tackle your first comment about reading, uh, I think the distinguishing factor between us and other animals is our intelligence, right? Our brain, with our cognitive capacity. You're not stronger than a gorilla. You're not faster than a gazelle. You can't fly. We can't swim that well. We can't breathe. So animals have all these other advantages over us. Our advantage over the rest of the animal kingdom is intelligence, right? So that's our gift. That's our strong suit. That's what allowed us to conquer the world. And now we're on the verge of conquering space. And to me, not to exercise that muscle, in quotation marks, not to honor it by exercising it is to deny your humanity. If your brain is a distinguishing asset, then you should exercise it and use it to the fullest. And I don't know, of a better way to exercising it by reading. Reading is like weightlifting for your brain. That's how I look at it. Like, if you take care of
Wow.
your body and you eat healthy, right? This obsession with health and diet and weightlifting and workout and what about the most important organ in your body? You're not going to nurture it, which is your brain. And I don't think watching TV does that. I don't think playing video games does that. I think intelligence is a big word, sure, but I think that the intelligence that comes from, or the knowledge, the wisdom that comes from books, is some of it's teaching us how to think. And I think thinking is an exercise. It's like jiu-jitsu. It's an effort. It's hard. You get better at it as you go, and I think it's very worthwhile. I think it's, again, to me, it is defining of our species. So why would I deny that gift? And I never understood it. People that I think very few people reject books, but most people don't have the discipline, perhaps. But I enjoy it. It's never been an effort to me. Like, I can get lost. I would gladly read for 8 hours a day if I could. I could easily. I just don't have the time, but I could do it. I really enjoy it. It's not an effort. And I think, going back to your second point was about jiu-jitsu. I think it has to do with identity. I think it matters. The history of your country. You know, why does 1776 matter? Why did it matter? It should matter. It does matter. It tells you the story of where you come from. It gives the country identity. It gives the people unity. It gives them purpose, right? It gives them direction. It helps them understand the present. You understand the present, you can guide your future. You can give it direction and purpose. So I think that as far as jiu-jitsu, that's the lesson that I've taken from jiu-jitsu history is there's a lot of things that I didn't know that now I understand better, and I have a better view, a better understanding, really, of where I would like jiu-jitsu to be in 20, 30 years. And now I think that was the takeaway. I think most people don't care at the same time. They're too busy just, taking care of their lives, which is fine. But I tell people, listen, just put the book in the bathroom, read it, even if it's 2 minutes a day, read a page a day, anything. Just have that habit, and hopefully the words capture you, and you want to spend more time with that, with the book. But it's, it's not, I think there's too much entertainment going around for,
Exactly.
it's too much competition for a book. A book, it's heavy. It's not necessarily fun for people if you don't have the habit. It's tedious. People get distracted. You'll play video games, you're immediately rewarded without any effort, any real effort. And I think reading is an effort. Like it's like going to the gym. I mean, if you're not exercising that part of your body, then you're suffering from intellectual obesity. It's like the equivalent. You don't work out, you're going to be unhealthy physically. If you're not exercising, you're not going to be mentally healthy. Perhaps that sounds judgmental, but that's how I always looked at it.
I mean, I see what you mean. You can also take the analogy to like, the way you feed your brain, the way you feed your senses, right? So you could be feeding your sense garbage, right? Garbage in, garbage out. We're not that different than computers, So putting the right nutrients into your brain is definitely gonna result in a more effective kind of way of life, of living, of being in the world, right? So a lot of these authors, like for example, you have your life in there, your experience, it's part of it, but also the life of all the lessons of the graces of the family, the good and the bad and everything that happens. Like I'm learning just from observing. So you don't need to just live your own experience. That's a limited type of way to experience the world and to learn. You accelerate your learning, like by reading these people that are coaches, that are more experienced, that are that have made the mistakes, that have overcome, that have, so you don't have to repeat the same mistakes. So I think books are fascinating. It's kind of like a hack for life. Like you get a book and then you absorbing that much faster than if you just had to live it. You couldn't possibly live 100 people's lives, but you could definitely read 100 books in your lifetime.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it. And I mean, the people who read the book seem to have liked it. Like there's always going to be some negative feedback, but I think it's been overwhelmingly positive that people seem to enjoy the book, and that's very rewarding. I'm happy to have played a part in helping bring Carlson's memory back to life and helping people understand the rise and evolution of jiu-jitsu.
What I think is fascinating, it's a little bit different than if he was like one of the Carlson people. I'm from Carlson Gracie team, but if it came from Carlson Gracie Jr. or from any of Carlson's black belts, it would be one thing. But the fact that you are a Leo Vieira, right? Leo Vieira's a black belt. It's like you're not talking about Carlson because you're from inside the Carlson. You're trying to promote the Carlson brand. It's like more genuine to the actual history. So that's what it was more interesting, attractive to me. The fact that you're from outside, the in a way, nobody's from outside Carlson Gracie, because if you really read the book, you'll find out that we're all Carlson Gracie to the core. Like if you really trace it back, you understand that. But the fact that you go beyond that, those kinds of team politics or ideologies, and it's like, okay, let me see history for what it is, regardless where I come from, and to really present it that way, I thought that was very refreshing, to say the least.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was going to make that point. Well, technically, we're all Carlson Gracie, but you since you made that point, I think that maybe it stems from my own views on the world and politics and nationalism. I'm more interested in facts than I am in politics. To me, that's very easy for me to look at. I might have my, I don't side with any political party at this stage of my life, but when I did, it was never difficult for me to criticize my own side. Like it's like, man, if we're wrong in principle. It doesn't matter that my team has to be winning all the time. If your team is wrong, your team is wrong. Like you can have a stance on these things and not really, be you know, side. Oh, you have to side with these guys or that guys. Like it's some kind of like group of fanatics. And to me, it was just that, you know, what are the facts of the matter? If it wasn't Carlson, it were someone else, Grace or non-Grace, I would have done the same. You know, I'm just trying to analyze the data available, which, by the way, mainly got from Shockey. You know, like I couldn't have written either of my books without Roberto Pedreira and his help in his books. So I always like to give the guy credit because he really, I mean, the heavy lifting was done by him, not by me. You know, I think I got the credit, but the heavy lifting was done by him. And but you know, to me, with the facts all that matter. You know, like to me, like what actually happened. So it wasn't really. My stance has never been political. I don't think so. I think it's been methodological at some points, but I think it's coming from a place of trying to get to the truth, whatever that happens to be. And Carlson just stood out. You know, actually, the comment about it's interesting. The comment, the idea of some of the inspiration, maybe not all of it, because I was already thinking about writing the book, but there was a comment made by Roberto Pedreira in private correspondence. There's a footnote in the book where I talk about it. And he said, if you read Shockey volume 2 and 3 carefully, about 2/3 of it is about Carlson Gracie. And that hit me like a ton of bricks when he wrote that. It was like, man, I completely missed that. Because Shockey is written, he's cataloging all this information, you know, like what happened in this year and that year by year, right? The Shockey 2 is from 1950 to I want to say 60 or 70, I can't remember now. And volume 3 is from then all the way to 1999, right? And if 2/3 of that is about Carlson, it's very clear that the records of the time are just pointing to the same guy over and over and over. So the records are all saying the same thing. This guy not only was the most active fighter in the family, the most successful fighter in the family, he was also by far the best coach. You know, and then some of the other interpretation was coming from when I was talking to these guys and they're described, because I was already aware in the first book, if you read it, like that part of the reason why Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu became so successful around the world, I think it's aspects of Brazilian culture that made its way onto the mats and from there onto the world. The relaxed manners, the açaí, the flip-flops, the surf culture. It's very carioca. It's very, very Brazilian in a lot of ways. And I think it's part of the appeal is that. What I had missed was that was not a feature of the Gracie Academy. That is a feature of Carlson's gym at the Figueiredo de Magalhães. And when I'm talking to these old timers and they're describing the gym to me and the dynamics, they're describing like how Carlson was and how they were, and I'm like, that's it. That's where it was born. Like, so when that was, and that you can identify Carlson moving jiu-jitsu outside of the Gracie Academy and creating a whole new environment for it, right? And it's changed jiu-jitsu. It changed it culturally. It changed it methodologically. It changed it technically. I mean, they're using the same word, right, jiu-jitsu, but it's something completely new. It's very different. I mean, and these guys will tell you. I mean, read the interviews; it's crystal clear. It's something. There's a big change, right, that goes on when Carlson opens his own place, and then later on, everyone copied him because it was a superior model. It was more appealing. It was better for performance, and it was better, maybe for business too. I don't know. But I think that there's definitely a change. Which, incidentally, Carlson was fully aware of that when he says that don't confuse Gracie Jiu-Jitsu with Carlson Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes.
He is fully aware that he's creating a whole new environment for Jiu-Jitsu. And again, all this time we've been using the same word. Jiu-Jitsu describe things that are fundamentally different. Much like Carlos and Helio, they don't change, they don't create something new out of judo, but they part from judo. They do create a new environment outside of judo that would lead to what they call Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, right? Carlson does something similar. He creates another transition, another mutation. Let's change this again, and let's create a new environment for what we now universally call Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's not the same. It's similar. It has a lot of similarities. It has the same lineage. It's the same genealogy. You can trace it back to judo, but it's not the same thing. Inside the Figueiredo de Magalhães Academy, there's a radical change that Jiu-Jitsu undergoes. And then later, Hollis copies him, and then even members of the Gracie Academy. This becomes very clear in the Royler Gracie interview at Gracie Humaita. They basically started training people the way Carlson trained people, And then everyone's doing the same thing, you know, Gracie Barra, Alliance, like they trace their lineage back to Hollis. But in reality, Hollis is just doing the same thing Carlson was doing. Carlson is the inception point to change jiu-jitsu, not just democratize it, but open it up. Not only them open it up, but like also to like, you know, create a more competitive environment for jiu-jitsu to involve. Like there's no evolution outside of competition. Any athlete knows that. And I think Carlson knew that. He knew what worked and what didn't work because of his experience in MMA. So he was looking at the self-defense curriculum for the Gracie Academy. And I have nothing against self-defense, but you know, it's not the most efficient way to teach someone how to fight. We know that. Any fighter will tell you the same thing. And Carlson knew it because he was a fighter. He wasn't interested in private lessons. He wasn't interested in finances. It was all about evolving jiu-jitsu. So I think in some ways, you know, Carlson was more committed to jiu-jitsu than everyone else in his family during that period, at least, you know, and I think he had a different vision, a more humanitarian, more altruistic, and ultimately it was better for jiu-jitsu. I think it was Paulo Filho who said Carlson was a necessity for jiu-jitsu. And I agree. I love that quote. I love that he said it. It was a necessity. Because without Carlson, I don't think we would be here right now. I mean, there are a lot of people in this story. We could say the same. We wouldn't be here if not for them. True.
Carlinhos or
Horion. Horion is probably,
Warren. Yeah,
you know, like, say what you want about it. If not for him, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
I think so.
But I think what Carlson did in terms of like being the lead head figure for jiu-jitsu during 3-4 decades in Brazil and truly transforming the art, it has been severely underestimated, underappreciated in the jiu-jitsu community. And, you know, I like you mentioned, I'm not a Carlson Gracie's direct student. I had the opportunity to meet him once briefly in California, but he's always been a somewhat of a hero of mine. And now that I got to learn a little bit more about him as a human being, like how he was with people, I mean, it's how I love the guy, you know, and it's a tragedy. I think his whole story is just, it really is. It reads like a tragedy, you know. It starts great, ends really bad. It's sad. It's sad. The guy deserves so much better.
Yeah. Yeah, for some people that don't understand jiu-jitsu or not within the jiu-jitsu community or train or practice, but maybe watched Royce and kind of heard and see the name Gracie Barra here and there, like, can you explain, like, you know, that's what people ask me, like, what is that? Like, there's Gracie Barra, there's Carlson Gracie, like, where did this come from? Like, where did it actually start? What's the first person and the second and the third? And like why there's so many different Gracie Barra or like Gracie gyms with all these different connotations?
Carlos Gracie had an experience with judo in Belém do Pará. When he moves to Rio, he takes over a school from a man called Donato Pires dos Reis. And they continued to use the term jiu-jitsu, which is how judo was known early in the 20th century. So most judokas just switched over from jiu-jitsu to judo. They modernized the term. Carlos Gracie didn't. They kept using the term jiu-jitsu precisely to differentiate themselves from judo.
Branding.
Yes, it was branding. It was like, instead of calling Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm going to call it Robert Jiu-Jitsu or whatever. Just call it something else. He just wanted to differentiate themselves. So he kept using the old name, right? Jiu-Jitsu is the older name of judo. Judo was a form of Jiu-Jitsu. But the thing is, Carlos had 21 children. His brother Helio had 9. They grew up together. So in one generation, we're talking 30 children, 20 of them male. And they don't all agree on what jiu-jitsu is. So they have slightly different interpretations. Gracie Barra has Carlinhos' vision, which is essentially, you know, has a lot of Carlson Gracie in it, because that whole group format, competitive jiu-jitsu comes from them, which is pretty much everyone, right? Like, there's very few people outside of those that are directly relating to the Valenti brothers or the Gracie University, people that are following that sort of, you know, genealogy. Or methodology, I should say. Everyone else is just practicing like Carlson, but a lot of the schools they're not under one hierarchy, because, you know, it's business at the end of the day. So they all have their brands. It's their surname, so they use it, you know, in any way they want. They'll create new logos. They'll brand it. You know, there was Gracie Elite for a minute. Now I think Kira calls it Gracie Core. and there's Hensel Gracie, there's, you know, Carlson Gracie, there's like all these different variants, but I think it's more of a business. They have the same product, but they're just, you know, they're marketing it on their own for their own purposes. They're not united. You're not united in one family. It's the same family, but they're all, you know, promoting their own brands. So it creates a bit of confusion, because you would think it would be one unified brand, right? But I mean, like any family, it's very contentious. Like I don't have, you know, 29 cousins and siblings in one generation.
Fighters.
I have a lot less, but it's already contentious. I imagine that if I did have, you know, 29 siblings and cousins growing up together, we'd be fighting a lot. And I think in some ways that fighting never really stops. They're still highly competitive with each other. And I think that played a role in jiu-jitsu. I talk about that in the book. I think that was a good thing. I think it was necessary that they were that competitive with each other, because I think competition, I mean, why work hard if there's no one to beat, right? Like, it's very easy to become complacent without competition. So I think competition, it pushes us to be better versions of ourselves. And maybe it's petty, maybe it's egotistical, maybe it's destructive in some ways. Maybe you could argue that. But at the end of the day, I think without that competitiveness, I don't think we would be here right now. You know, I mean, I'm a competitive individual. If I didn't try to beat people in the gym, I wouldn't have won a world title. So, you know, so these things are just consequences of you know, being in an environment where people are trying to beat you.
Yeah, well, that's why we have siblings, right? Siblings are for that very reason. If you're a only child, you're not gonna have a lot of competition. You're gonna get your way too much, and you're not gonna excel or figure it out, or have to like manage your emotions, or like, you know, get called out when on your stuff, like when you have a sibling. So in some ways there's more friction, but you know, look at all the great different brands of jiu-jitsu that sprang out of it. So yeah, so there's a lot of variety within jiu-jitsu world in itself, and even today, right? There is are you familiar with the term keep it playful?
Yeah.
What is your take on that?
I think it's a way of like going after students that don't want a competitive approach to jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
It's very it's very contradictory, because if I'm trying to beat you, you're trying to beat me. That's how we roll, right? Now, we don't have to try to hurt each other. We don't have to try to kill each other. We can both turn the volume down. But at the end of the day, we're still trying to beat each other. That's how this game is played, right? It's like chess. You can play chess playfully, sure, but you're still trying to win. That's the whole point of chess, is try and look for the checkmate, right?
Right.
And I think that, you know, the whole keep it playful thing is a way of tackling or, you know, marketing jiu-jitsu towards a different kind of clientele that is less competitive, perhaps they're older. I mean, it is playful, but there's no contradiction between being playful and being competitive. I think that, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to make of it. It sounds very confusing to me in some ways. It's like, I'm not sure what they want to do with that. Sure, you can keep it playful, but define playful. What's playful? Like, just you're having fun? Okay, but I have fun trying to beat you, and I have even more fun if you're trying to beat me. You know, that's why we do this, is we get a kick out of it, right? It's fun because of that. Imagine if every time you train with me, I'd let you tap me as many times as you wanted and pass my guard and sweep me at the first try.
Boring.
It'd be bored. It'd be like that game that you play that you can master in 30 seconds. You never want to play it again. You know, and yeah, I'm not a huge fan of their approach to jiu-jitsu, to be honest. I think it goes against everything jiu-jitsu represents, and it's become overly commercialized. I think people, like, this is not directed at anyone in particular, it's a community as a whole. It's become very, very money hungry, and I dislike it. I think we lost a lot of important things along the way on this road to become, you know, the most practiced martial art in the world. Let's become popular. I think there's some really important things that are lost along the way. And I'm not pointing fingers here. I'm as much part of the problem as anyone else. I'm not suggesting I'm a solution or that I have a solution. I'm just nostalgic of some things that were lost.
Yeah, I can see that. Wow, there's so much, so many lessons in the history and the rise and the evolution of jiu-jitsu. I couldn't help but notice that jiu-jitsu, sure, as a type of judo or spin-off of judo, rebranding judo in Brazil, it started in the Amazon and it spread from the Amazon, right? It was transplanted to Rio and from Rio to the world. And that's the same path that you could say the Santo Daime doctrine, which I belong to, is the exact same path that Santo Daime doctrine has for expansion, which I'm studying and writing on it. And also acai, like the acai culture. Like
Yeah.
it starts in the Amazon, okay, goes to Rio. That's like, it didn't go to São Paulo, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Totally skipped all the cool things to skip São Paulo. I'm from São Paulo, so I'm very sad about that. It goes straight from the Amazon to Rio to the world, right? So I found that was an interesting parallel. Another thing that I noticed is that, probably in the beginning of jiu-jitsu, there was not a lot of women. So there was not much talking about women's jiu-jitsu or like women, competing or anything anywhere in the book because I don't know why. There's just not many in the beginning. But even after that, it's just like not, I don't know when women's jiu-jitsu really took place. Is it we're the third wave? Are we the fourth wave?
This is
Like,
the third one.
okay,
I mean, when I started training, there were already women training. It was rare, but they
Mhm.
were starting to train. It became more acceptable too. The thing about jiu-jitsu, it's very. I mean, the resistance came from Brazilian machismo.
Mhm.
Two, the times were different too.
Yes.
Women start occupying larger spaces in society. Really, in Brazil, at least in the '80s, '80s, with the democratization of the government itself. It was under a dictatorship prior to 80, 84, 85. So, so all these changes are taking place, and the world was changing. So women, were more accepted in the gym. Jiu-jitsu became less hooligan. It had a hooligan culture to it, which was not very welcoming for women and children. Like these guys were like, they were brawlers. Like they don't like to talk about it, but I mean, they were the bullies. They were not the anti-bully crowd. They were the bullies. If you
Mhm.
you were more likely to be a bully than a anti-bully kind of person. And the other thing is, um, the practice became less, aggressive. Like people weren't hitting each other in the face anymore. Like before, they trained with slaps. When these things died, they made more room for women and children to train. But like most women are willing. Most women, even I mean, the '80s, like there's the touch thing too. Like the positions in jiu-jitsu, they all resemble sex positions. So for a woman to have a guy on top of her inside her closed guard, that like how most women would look at that, it looks like I would be abused in that position, or that the guy's going to get an erection, or for an outsider, it may look that way, right? So it's a very intimidating environment for a woman. And if they see guys getting hit in the head and they're like that aggressive hooligan crowd, it's not very welcoming. But when these things started changing and jiu-jitsu started cleaning up its image, and the slaps were removed, and the women gaining more rights and space in society, the slow death of Brazilian machismo in Brazilian society. When these things started happening, then obviously the female population in jiu-jitsu started to grow.
Absolutely. And yeah, the I think women is best served training with women. I really prefer and appreciate gyms that have women's classes. It just kind of gets harder the higher the belt that you are. It gets harder and harder for women to find competitive women. So if you're a beginner, maybe white belt, blue belt, purple belt, and you go to a women's class, it's cool, you can have a lot of fun. But then when you start to become higher belts and you go to a women's class, you're teaching. Like you're not
Yeah.
you're not benefiting as much. It's more like you're giving back. And but I like to create that. I enjoyed to be able to create that, but that's not necessarily gonna further my jujitsu. But I do prefer, like, when I really want to experience some awesome, women's jiu-jitsu, I have to drive from LA to San Diego to go to Leticia's gym, or even in my gym. Like, I moved, right? I started in Temecula. Carlson Gracie Temecula is the headquarters of the West Coast for Carlson Gracie. It's huge. Like, the school started really small. It was like maybe 12 of us or something, like back in the day. And then now I think he has like 200 kids, 150. I don't know the number. It's ridiculous. The mat's full all around, and it's just little kids, middle kids, teenagers, adults, women, everything. Gi, no gi, in very competitive gym. I think that is why that gym did so well, and why gyms sometimes do so well. One, it's like it's clean, and it's family environment. There's a lot of kids, there's a lot of women, so it's like family. There's no, it's clean, it's just welcoming for people. And the owner, he not only trains and teaches all the classes, which is something I noticed that you do. You're teaching in your gym. You're not like teaching seminars or taking your vacations and just gone. You're just leaving it to the lower belts to teach. Like, you're there, you're nurturing, and then he's also competitive. So he understands competition, and he's still competing. So it's kind of exciting. Like, okay, your coach is like, winning, right? So everybody competes, everybody trains, like, most people compete in that gym, and that's really fun because there's a lot of energy in that. I think that's kind of like the Carlson Gracie thing. It's really revived there in Temecula under Tom Cronin. I don't know if you know Tom Cronin Jr. But really excited. I feel very blessed to have started there, because if it wasn't for that, I don't know where my life would be. Like, a lot of transformations, a lot of healing, a lot of inner growth, personal growth, just from being on the mat and going through this evolution of my, my psychology, of my physicality, of everything, emotion, spirituality, you name it, right? Jiu-jitsu can do that for you.
Yeah, it's grown very quickly too. Like, in the span of my experience in jiu-jitsu, which is going on a quarter of a century now, 25, going on 26 years. I've seen it change dramatically, grow dramatically. I mean, it's people that started training 5-10 years ago and can't appreciate how much jiu-jitsu has changed.
Mm.
And it's still changing. We're
Right.
watching it change. Like, I have two chapters about this, actually. Well, really, part 4, the whole part 4 in the book is about this. It's like the changes we're undergoing in terms of its Americanization, in terms of commercialization. Its viewership it's growing. It's becoming wider. Yeah, there's a lot. Like, there's a lot of it's a whole new martial art, really. Like, the only thing that's the same is the uniform. It's virtually the same, and we're still rolling around on the ground. But I mean, even how we roll was changed completely. Like, there's a whole no-gi crowd. Like, that's something that didn't exist. There's no such thing as gi and no-gi jiu-jitsu. It was just jiu-jitsu. I mean, we didn't even make a distinction between jiu-jitsu and MMA. To us, jiu-jitsu was just like preparation for MMA. That's how we looked at it. Jiu-jitsu was how you prepared for MMA. That's what jiu-jitsu was. Now it's a completely separate world. I have students who only do gi. I have students that only do no-gi. And I have students that do jiu-jitsu because of MMA. But I have very few students that care about all three of those worlds. It's very disintegrated.
Yeah, I think it's important to train in all different things, not only like gi and no gi, but also there's judo and there's wrestling. I think if you can't take people down, like, I think that's why I'm successful when I compete, is because I dedicated time to learn to not really just pull guard. That's my last case. Like, if I'm winning and I want to stall, I pull guard, I jump to guard, just hold. But I enjoy. I like the takedown. I think the takedown, it's like that's the art part. Like, the throw, the takedown, those kinds of things. And it's like, you're not gonna learn if you start on your knees every time in your gym. I should say,
Yeah.
go learn some judo. Go learn some different things, some takedown, some self-defense. I try, be well-rounded, right? So, yeah. There's this quote from the book. It says, "If it wasn't for me, the Gracies would be selling bananas in Rio de Janeiro." I think that's amazing. Like, it's so bold. It's like
Yeah.
so, it's like a punch in the face.
Yeah. Well, he was very bitter towards his family towards the end. I
Yeah.
think it had to do with the inheritance of his father Carlos, because from all accounts, Carlson gave all his money from his fights, which I don't know how big those purses were, but they sound hefty because they got it was gate money, right? They got a percentage
Yeah.
of the gate, so they have like thousands of people watching. So I'd imagine it'd be like pretty big purses. And Carlson gave all the money to the family, so they're talking about these properties that were bought with that money, and then his siblings who never fought kept it. The one
Mm.
who was getting punched in the face, was getting
Right.
it jumping in the arena to throw himself in the fire, and he kept nothing. So I think
Wow.
that certainly created a lot of resentment. But and there's some truth. I mean, it's he's half joking, but there's some truth to that. Like, I
Yeah.
think that without Carlson, the Gracie brand would have disappeared in the 50s in Brazil.
Yeah.
That would have been difficult for there to be any continuation for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or even like the opportunity for it to grow as it did afterwards without Carlson.
Yeah.
So there's it's a funny quote, but it's not too far from the truth.
Not too far from the truth. And then, the same thing kind of sort of happened to Rickson, that he also got bitter. Like, he left, right? He left. There was like a fallout with his family. I read the book Breathe,
Yeah.
and also the same thing happened. He was upset and because of money issues, right? And then it seems like that was the practice. It's like, okay, you don't get to keep the money. You don't get to keep the money. You don't get to keep the money. The money goes towards some kind of magical family fund, and then eventually they're like, okay, I've done that. Now what? Like, now what do I get out? What do I have to show for it, right?
Yeah.
So that's what happened to Rickson. He took off. He went to Japan, right? And then Healy was upset, and Carlson too. He's like, he's not gonna be. He wasn't, teaching under, with Helio and those guys, working for, with Warrior and stuff. He did his own thing. He went with Rose, right? So it was Carlson and Rose, and there was Helio and Rorian, and then later Carlinhos had the vision, right? Some people are really good business people, right? And marketeers, and had the vision to unite instead of divide. I
Yeah.
think that's the key lesson for me, is that those who have the vision to unite rather than divide is the people that will prosper. Is the people that have the vision that will create something that will last, right, into the future.
Yeah. Yeah, Carlinhos is definitely a vision. I mean, you have to spend some time with Carlinhos to appreciate him as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
I only knew him from stories, and obviously, knew who he was, and I knew something about him. But I had the first opportunity to spend time with him when I interviewed the first time. Very little time, but the second time, second book, I got to spend a lot of time with him. A whole day, actually. Breakfast, lunch. We were together for a good 8 hours that day, and
Nice.
yeah, it was one of the highlights of my life. Looking back, it really was. I'll remember that day as one of the best days of my life. I
Wow.
learned a lot. I learned a lot from watching him. Just watching him.
It's very calm, right?
You see why he's successful. You understand. I can be like very distracted too, but when I focus, I can be very, very. I can be a good reader of people. It's very easy to understand why he's so successful. He's exceptionally good with people. Very good. Very good.
Right.
Very charismatic.
Wasn't he in a story? Correct me if I'm wrong. In the story in which, because I used to train under Ray Diogo, and then there's a Ray Diogo story in the book, in which there was like a tournament, and and Ray Diogo was like, he lost to someone. I forgot one of the Gracies.
Daniel Simões. Yeah,
Oh, there wasn't a Gracie. It was Simões.
it was Simões. Yeah, well,
Yes.
Daniel Simões is like, it's kind of like adopted by the family. They refer to him as a Gracie. I'm not sure if he is or isn't.
Okay, so it was one of theirs, from their
Yeah.
den.
And Carlson lost his mind, and Carlinhos had to calm him down because he's about to fight his brother Hobson.
In front of everybody. But that didn't ever happen, right? He said there's also a part of the book that says that Carlson never got on the street fight. So thank God.
I think he would get. I could see. I mean, again, I don't know Carlson in person, but just reading, like going over these interviews and like learning about him, I think he was the kind of guy that would talk a lot of shit, but like, I don't think he would ever actually get down to fight. He's not a troublemaker. He was just a very combative person, and I can understand it because I'm similar in some ways. Like, I can argue with you, or you can scream at me, blah blah blah, but 5 minutes later we're back to being friends. It's I think it's how he was. He just had that. He's by nature very an antagonist. I think he was described that way as a naturally antagonistic, very combative person, liked to argue, like he liked riña, he liked fighting, he liked competition. So I think he rubbed people off the wrong way, but I don't think it ever came from a bad place. I think that's the thing that's so endearing about Carlson is nothing he did ever seemed to me. He made mistakes. There's some things that that you learn along the way. Oh, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have said that. I think that was a mistake, but I don't think it ever came from a bad place. I think that's what's really what caught my attention about it. Was I think that every time he did something, it was always coming from a good place.
Yeah, he was very generous. He would allow people, any kind of people from any family, to train jiu-jitsu, to learn jiu-jitsu, and not hold back the techniques. It's like, oh, this is only for the Gracies. Like, let's keep our secret stash of techniques just for us. No, it's like, let's teach everybody everything. Let's make it competitive across the board. And it doesn't matter if you're white or if you're black or if you're poor or if you're rich. If you can't pay for training, you can just clean the gym, do something like and then you can train even if you can afford it. And so there are many stories that he even would let like homeless people sleep on the gym and things like that, and pay for everybody's like tabs and things like that, right? I experienced that.
He was he was not a very material kind of person. He just was not attached to these things. It was, I think his life mission was to promote jiu-jitsu and get jiu-jitsu to grow, and he did that. He accomplished that. And what's so tragic about it is that he didn't get to see it. He didn't get the appreciation. He wasn't acknowledged. And I think when he saw those guys in Pride winning, I think that's what broke him. Because that was around the time they had that split. It was like when Pride was like really blowing up, and that was his dream, was like to see his Roosters fighting in the world stage and winning, fighting in the modern day Coliseum. He fought his whole life for that. And he barely got to enjoy. I mean, yeah, he cornered some people in some big events, but I think that, I think that's what broke him. It was just that, he fought his whole life to place jiu-jitsu where it was, and he didn't really get to enjoy it, And I think at an old age, you probably, sure, you care about money, but I think it was more of that than the money itself that broke him. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's really, truly tragic. Yeah, I mean, I really wish things had gone different. Like, at the same time, I understand those guys. I don't think they were necessarily wrong either. I think there was just bad communication, the distance. When people grow distance and they communicate, and I've had this in my life many times. In my life, when we're not communicating well and grow distant, then next thing you know, there's no more reconciliation. There's no more bridge. The bridge is burnt, and then you can't rebuild it.
Yeah.
But it was like, looking back, it's like, man, we could have maintained that bridge. That did not need to get burned down. But it's hard. Being a coach is very emotionally demanding. And I think Carlson was bitter over like all the effort, all the energy that he put in to his students over the years, and not feeling that he got the recognition he truly deserved. He really deserved that recognition.
Yes, and to speak to this point, what I gathered from the book and from the tragedy and all the stories is that sometimes you can develop yourself very highly in one area of life, but really lack in other areas of life. Just fighting and winning is definitely not all that there is to life.
Yeah.
So if you don't develop what? Your relationship skills, your social skills, your emotional intelligence, your ability to communicate, your financial intelligence, what's going to happen is, you can be really good in one area, but you can be a total teenager in many other areas. So sometimes I find that in some, people that are highly what do you say, evolved in genius in one area of life, but completely unable to function in many at other areas of life. And this lack of balance is what take people down.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, speaking for myself, there's some things that I think I'm good at. Some things are easy to me.
Hmm.
You know, some things I think I have a natural gift for, and some things that I'm just absolutely awful at. You know, like, and I think we all have these things. You know, and you have to, like, life is about learning that balance, like learning these skills that we don't have that we need. You know, I can be very self-centered. I can be oblivious. I can be in my head a lot. You know, not really, realize that I might be upsetting someone. I've done this many times in my life, and like it's not easy to change. You know, it's
Hmm.
very difficult because at the same time, if you're happy with yourself, how much do you really want to change? You know, so even that's a balance. Like, if I'm not really intentionally hurting someone, maybe it hurts someone's feelings here and there. Do you really want to change and be someone different, or are you happy with who you are? And maybe some people just got to leave your life because they don't accept you how you are. So even that, like, how much do you really want to change who you are, is it's debatable. So there's some things I think we need to adapt to. Like, there's some things that I've learned a hard way in life, and some things that I'm still learning and still I'm aware of. But I think that's the same for everyone. We just got to be aware of it first, and then make that decision if we really want to change that about ourselves or not. If it's worth it.
Yeah, change takes a lot of work. And what happens is some of the traits that we learned were successful strategies. You in some ways, those strategies, good or bad, the good and the bad, made you who you were, and you sort of succeeded in many regards. And then it's like, now how do I pick apart, right? That's why I like to study psychology and spirituality and all kinds of things, because it kind of, that's, you enter in the realm of the psyche and the spirit and the emotions, in which you start to pick apart those things and dissect, like, okay, what here is worth keeping, what part of this is mine, what part of this is, has to go, some kind of dying, some kind of, letting go of the old so that the new can emerge. So it's a process of rebirth,
Yeah.
right? And it's not easy, but it's like a skill. It's just like a jujitsu. If that is an area of life that you feel that, because there's collateral damage that can occur when you completely neglect the area. So if you feel like, okay, this is kind of starting to be a problem and I want to address, then you have to do the inner work, right? Just like you train jujitsu, you can train emotional skills, you can
Yeah.
train spirituality, you can go read a book, you can go take a class, you can go learn meditation, go learn breathing, go learn something. You got to do something, right? It's just like any skill, weightlifting, right? You got to do the heavy lifting at first, so you're gonna suck at it. So nobody likes to go through the suck of it and admit that, like, I suck. I'm a white belt in spirituality. I don't know religion from spirituality. I don't know what I believe. I think it's all a bunch of BS. And I don't care about my emotions. I have no access to my emotions. And then here we go. Then you don't have relationships.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah. that makes a lot of sense.
I know. That's a whole different rabbit hole. But do you see the connection between jiu-jitsu and mental health? Like, what have you seen in terms of transformation, not only for you in your life, of you and your students?
I think it gives people a community. It's
Mhm.
not just the endorphins from rolling around.
Right.
Yeah, the endorphins, like the chess aspect of it, the tactics, the technique
Mhm.
itself. That's all fun. But I think community. I think community for sure. I think people need a place to belong.
Mhm.
Emma calls it the third place.
Mhm.
First place is home. Got to go home.
Mhm. Mhm.
Second place is work. Got to go to work. The third place is where you choose to be. Right. The third place is that's your special place. That's your church. And then I think it is church for a lot of people. It's where you get your mental healing. And jiu-jitsu has been both to me. It's been a place of destruction and creation, both. I've
Yeah.
had really bad moments on the mats.
Mhm.
Had some of the most difficult moments of my life were because of jiu-jitsu, but also
Mhm.
the best. So I take the good with the bad, and the whole of it is what we call life. It's this little brief little experiment we have, this little brief little moment where you get to choose, what you want to be and what you want to do. And I chose jiu-jitsu, and it's come with amazing experiences. Not all great, many bad ones too. I suffer from arthritis. I'm 42, and
Mhm.
my wrists are destroyed. I can't
Mhm.
do a push-up.
Mhm.
So all these things, but to me, it's been very healthy. I've seen it help people with PTSD, anxiety, depression,
Exactly.
drug addiction, alcoholism, you know,
Mhm.
socially awkward children. I did myself. Like I was a very introverted child. Like I was very, very insecure. Um, yeah, like there's a lot of things about my childhood that like I think jujitsu really helped shape me into a better person. Like it carved me into something that I aspired to become. And in many ways I think I succeeded. Not in every way, but I think in some ways I sort of became the person I wanted to become, or I'm in that process still. But that was through jujitsu. So doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It's
Mhm.
going to be pain. There's the hard. There's the suck part. Like there's all that. But ultimately, from these moments, that's when that's the chisel and the hammer right there. That's the you carving yourself into something new. It's going to hurt. It's going to suck, but that's the journey. Like, I saw a meme the other day, and it was just like, working out is hard, staying home is
Mhm.
hard, working is hard, not working is hard. And so it was something the equivalent. It doesn't matter what you do; it's going to be hard. So just
Pick your heart. Pick your
pick your
cross.
heart, and
Pick
I
up your
love that.
cross.
It's exactly how I look at things. I'm like,
Mhm.
pick your heart. I
Yeah.
I feel that I've chosen a lot of hard paths in my life,
Mhm.
but they were the right kind of hards, most of them at least. I've wasted a
Mhm.
lot of time on some useless battles, but I think most battles I chose to fight in my life were very productive, and I'm happy I chose them. And they led to amazing new places and amazing people and amazing new experiences. And I think ultimately that's what I want. I want to be in my deathbed one day, and I want to look back and I say, it's a good life, lived it well, and I made the world a slightly better place. That's the only thing I don't want is be in my deathbed thinking that I made the world a worse place. I want to be proud of myself and say I made it a little bit better than it was when I found it. And if I
Mhm.
can accomplish that, that's mission accomplished, right?
You're sounding a lot like Brandon Burchard.
I don't know who that is.
Brandon Burchard, he's like a coach, like an executive coach. He wrote many books, and he that's kind of like his he had a close encounter with death, and he had to rethink his whole life. And at the end of the day, he's like, all I care about is like, did I live? Did I love? Did I matter? So that's his whole thing.
Yeah,
It's like changed his whole
yeah.
life. Yeah,
That's
you'd like
because
Brandon Burchard.
that's the those are the wrapping up our conversation full circle. That's
Mhm.
the conclusions I have from my existential questions and crises. Is just if I lived a good life and I did some good, I added something to the equation, I did something for jiu-jitsu, then I feel like okay, it was worth it.
Absolutely. On a final note, we're coming down to the end of our conversation. It was a great pleasure. And what is next for Robert Drysdale, right? Do you have another book in you, a documentary? Like, what's going
So,
on?
documentary is in progress. We had a lot of hiccups. Like I got to write a book just about the hiccups of the documentary. That in itself deserves like 500 pages, you know. But no, that's going to happen. It's still in the works. It's just taking a lot longer than expected. I have projects for other books. Organizing it, having an outline has been difficult. I want to write a book about critiquing martial arts, like the technical and philosophical and methodological problems that I see in a lot of martial arts. There's not a lot of scholarly literature on other martial arts. I always felt out for sure like other martial arts would have the equivalent of Shoki, you know, like something that's very dense and academically sound. It was like, no, there isn't. There really isn't. So, you know, it's going to be difficult to write that book, but I plan on writing a book on, you know, the psychology of fighting, the psychology of coaching. I have plans to write a novel one day. I don't know when that's going to be, but that's just another one of my, I just don't have time. Honestly, I would be more actively writing books if I had the time. I don't have the time. I'm working 12 hours a day, 6-7 days a week. You know,
when do you write?
Well, when I was writing a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon, but now I'm teaching a lot more, so I don't have that time. And when I do have time, I'm either too tired or I got errands to run. Because writing requires a fresh mind. Absolutely. You can't be tired. It requires thinking, and thinking is a lot of energy. You're burning a lot of calories when you're thinking. So it requires high energy levels. And if I'm teaching 4 classes a day, I don't have that energy. So what I'm thinking about doing is waking up earlier and doing at least some reading in the morning, and then using my weekends to write. I'll just like say like every Sunday, 5 hours a day. You know, if I can get like a few thousand words in, I think that's significant. Maybe I can at that pace, maybe a book every year or two. You know, hopefully, I don't know. It's finding the time is the real challenge.
Amazing. That's fascinating. One thing is to be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Another thing is to run a team. Another thing is to have kids. Another thing is to write books. It's like you seems like you do it all. Like, so it's very impressive, you know, everything that you do, everything that you've done for the sport and how you show up in the world. And we're looking forward to your books. And then how can people work with you? Do you do seminars? Do you do private? Like, how can people connect with you?
Yeah. Yes, I teach seminars, teach privates. I can't do all social media because there's just too many platforms. The only one I'm pretty active on is Instagram. So you can message me on Instagram, at Robert Drysdale JJ. So message me there anytime. I'm pretty good at responding. Private seminars, books, questions. I like to make new friends. I'm always making. That's what probably the best thing about this journey, about the documentary and the books, has been all the amazing people I've met through them. Like, I very, very proud of that. I'm very happy that I got to exchange emails and become friends with so many great people. Like, truly, like super interesting people from all over the world have written me. I think I've made like 10, like at least 10 lifelong friends, because just through people I've never met and may never meet, but just through private correspondence, you know, some truly interesting people. And I think that's probably my favorite thing about having written the books is like these new friends that I made.
That's wonderful. I hope that everybody go check it out on Amazon, go get a book, and learn more about Jiu-Jitsu and about the history of Jiu-Jitsu, and keep rolling, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Robert, for your time. I hope that we can do this again. I hope next time we can maybe turn up the light so you can see your face.
Yeah, it's just like, it got dark here. I'm like outside. And this light goes on and off on its own. It's weird.
I know. It's okay. Maybe we'll do the next one in Portuguese or something.
Okay, sure.
But it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.